Iris's hands trembled as she lit the wick of her last storm and shelter candle, watching the flame catch and hold. 3 months. That's all she had left before the market management made her eviction official. 3 months to turn around a dying dream she'd poured every penny, every sleepless night, every desperate hope into. The scent rose between her fingers, sea salt and rain, the smell of survival after devastation. And she wondered if anyone would ever understand what she was trying to say with her candles. That scent could speak. That fragrance could feel like an embrace. How much for that one? The voice was low, smooth, and came from directly beside her. She hadn't even heard him approach. Iris looked up, and her breath caught. The man standing at her stall wasn't like her usual customers. He wore a charcoal suit that probably cost more than her entire month's rent, tailored so perfectly it moved with him like a second skin. Dark hair, sharp jawline, eyes the color of smoke and steel. He looked like he'd stepped out of a boardroom and wandered into her little corner of handmade dreams by mistake. But he wasn't looking at her like she was a mistake. He was looking at the candle in her hand, like it held secrets. This one? Iris's voice came out steadier than she felt. She held up the storm and shelter candle, its glass container catching the afternoon light. $45? She watched his expression, waiting for the inevitable flinch. $45 was steep for a candle. She knew that. But her candles weren't just wax and wick. They were stories, memories. Comfort poured into glass. He didn't flinch. "Tell me about it," he said. And the way he said it, like he actually wanted to know, like he had all the time in the world, made something dangerous flutter in her chest. Iris set the candle down between them, her fingers lingering on the smooth glass. It's called Storm and Shelter. The top notes are sea salt and ozone, that electric feeling right before a storm breaks. The middle is rain on concrete, petrichor, and the base. She closed her eyes briefly, letting herself fall into the story she'd crafted. The base is driftwood and amber. It's what it feels like to come in from the cold, to be safe when the world is raging outside. When she opened her eyes, he was staring at her, not at the candle, at her. "You don't just make candles," he said quietly. "You make feelings." The flutter in her chest became a full-blown ache. "Yes," she whispered. "That's exactly it." Reese Sterling hadn't expected to feel anything today. He'd come to the Riverside Artisan Market as part of his due diligence. A cold, calculated assessment of the property his investment group had acquired 3 weeks ago. The market was underperforming, the vendor contracts were a mess, and the management company was running it into the ground. He'd planned to tour the stalls incognito, gather data, and make his recommendation to the board: liquidate or renovate. He hadn't planned on her. Reese picked up the candle she'd described, bringing it to his nose. The scent hit him immediately. Complex, layered, utterly unlike the generic vanilla and lavender garbage he'd smelled at the other stalls. This was art. This was craft. And the woman who'd created it was looking at him like she was afraid to hope he'd understand. God, she was beautiful. Not in a polished corporate way. Her dark hair was pulled back in a messy bun, and there was a smudge of soot on her cheek from the candle she'd been lighting. But her eyes were bright with passion, and when she'd closed them to describe her creation, she'd looked almost reverent. She believed in what she was making. That belief was more attractive than any perfume. "How long have you been here?" Reese asked, setting the candle down carefully. "At this market?" 2 years, Iris said, and he heard the slight hesitation in her voice. "Well, almost 2 years. I'm up for lease renewal next month." Reese had read the vendor files. He knew exactly which stalls were on the chopping block. He'd seen the red flag next to Scent and Soul in the management company's report. Low revenue. Recommend non-renewal. Looking at her now, at the careful display of jewel-toned candles, each one labeled with evocative names like Midnight Garden and First Snow and Copper and Clove, he felt something cold and furious settle in his chest. They were going to evict her. They were going to throw her out because she wasn't profitable enough, never mind that her work was exceptional. Never mind that she'd built something beautiful in a market full of mass-produced garbage. "What's your best seller?" he asked, forcing his voice to stay casual. Iris's face lit up. "Oh, that's easy. Coming Home. It's honeysuckle and amber with a base of vanilla and sandalwood. It's..." She paused, biting her lip. "It's the scent of being loved, of being waited for, of walking through the door and knowing you're exactly where you belong." Reese felt something crack open in his chest. He'd spent 15 years rebuilding his family's empire from the ground up after his father's reckless decisions nearly destroyed it. 15 years of ruthless deals and emotional detachment. 15 years of treating every relationship as a transaction and every connection as a liability. He didn't have a home. He had penthouses in 3 cities. He didn't have love. He had a rotation of elegant, temporary companions who knew better than to ask for more. And this woman, with soot on her cheek and hope in her eyes, had just described the one thing he'd convinced himself he'd never need. "I'll take the storm and shelter," Reese heard himself say. "And the coming home." Iris blinked. Then her face broke into a radiant smile. "Really? Oh, thank you. Thank you so much. Let me wrap those for you." She turned away to package his purchase, and Reese allowed himself one moment of brutal honesty. He wanted to buy every candle in this stall. He wanted to write her a check that would solve all her problems. He wanted to fire the management company and personally rewrite her lease with terms so favorable she'd never have to worry again. But that wasn't how business worked. And Reese Sterling always played by the rules. Even when the rules were about to destroy something, someone extraordinary. Iris was still buzzing from the sale when Marcus Chen appeared at her stall an hour later. Marcus was the market manager, a thin man with a perpetual frown and a clipboard that seemed permanently attached to his hand. Iris had dealt with him exactly 3 times in 2 years, and each interaction had left her feeling smaller and more disposable. "Ms. Winters." Marcus's voice was clipped, professional, and utterly devoid of warmth. "I need a moment of your time." Iris's stomach dropped. "Of course." Marcus glanced around her stall with barely concealed disdain. "I'm here to inform you that your lease renewal application has been reviewed by the management committee." "No. No, please, not now. Not today." "And?" Iris forced the word out. "Your sales figures don't meet our minimum threshold for vendor retention. We're denying your renewal. You have 30 days to vacate the premises." The world tilted. 30 days. Not 3 months. 30 days. "But I was told I had until next month to..." "The committee moved up the review process," Marcus said, his tone suggesting this conversation was already over. "We're streamlining operations. The market needs vendors who can produce consistent revenue, not..." He waved a dismissive hand at her carefully arranged display. "Hobby projects. Hobby projects. 2 years of 16-hour days. 2 years of burned fingers and failed batches and slowly, painstakingly building a customer base. 2 years of pouring every cent of her savings into supplies and rent and the desperate hope that her art could become her livelihood. A hobby project." "I can increase my revenue," Iris said, and she hated how her voice shook. "Give me 1 more quarter. I have new products launching. I've been building my online presence. The decision is final, Ms. Winters. This is my life." The words burst out of her, loud enough that nearby vendors turned to stare. Iris didn't care. "This stall is everything I've worked for. You can't just—" "Actually, I can." Marcus's expression was bored. "Your lease expires in 30 days. If you're not out by then, you'll be in breach of contract and subject to—" "Is there a problem here?" The voice was smooth, commanding, and achingly familiar. Iris turned, and there he was. The man from earlier, the one who'd bought her candles, the one who'd looked at her like her work mattered. He wasn't smiling now. Marcus straightened, his professional mask slipping into something almost nervous. "This is a private conversation, sir. If you'll excuse us." "I don't think I will." The stranger moved closer, positioning himself slightly in front of Iris. The gesture was subtle but unmistakable. Protective. "I couldn't help but overhear. You're evicting this vendor? That's none of your concern." "Actually," the stranger said, his voice dropping to something cold and dangerous, "it is. I'm an investor with significant interest in this market's future, and I'm very concerned about management decisions that remove the market's most talented artisans in favor of what, exactly? Mass-produced mediocrity?" Marcus's face flushed. "Our vendors are all— I've toured every stall here today. This one." He gestured to Iris's display without looking away from Marcus. "Is the only one offering genuinely unique, high-quality products. So before you make this eviction official, I suggest you reconsider." "The committee has already." "Then I suggest you reconvene the committee." The stranger's smile was sharp as broken glass. "Because I'd hate to have to mention in my upcoming report that the market management is actively driving away its best talent." There was a long, tense silence. Finally, Marcus swallowed hard. I'll bring it back to the committee, but I can't make any promises." "See that you do." Marcus practically fled. Iris stood frozen, her heart pounding so hard she could hear it in her ears. The stranger turned to face her, and up close, she could see the tension in his jaw, the barely controlled fury in his eyes. "Are you okay?" he asked, and his voice was gentle now, all the cold steel replaced by something warmer. "I don't—" "Who are you?" Iris managed. "Why did you do that?" He hesitated, and Iris saw the moment he made a decision. "My name is Reese," he said, "and I have a proposition for you." Reese knew he was about to cross a line. He should walk away. He should maintain his cover, complete his assessment, and let the board make the final call on the market's future. Getting personally involved was the opposite of sound business practice. But the sight of Iris being dismissed, her life's work called a hobby project, had ignited something primal in him. He wanted to protect her. More than that, he wanted to give her the tools to protect herself. A proposition? Iris was looking at him with wary confusion. "I don't understand." "Let's talk somewhere private," Reese said. He glanced around at the other vendors, all of whom were pretending not to watch their conversation. "Is there a cafe nearby?" 10 minutes later, they were seated at a small table in a quiet corner of the market's coffee shop. Iris had her hands wrapped around a mug of tea she hadn't touched, and Reese was trying to figure out how to make his insane idea sound remotely reasonable. "You said you're an investor," Iris said finally. "What kind of investor?" "Venture capital, primarily. I evaluate businesses, recommend improvements, facilitate growth." All technically true. "I'm currently working on a project involving this market." Iris's eyes widened. "You're trying to buy the market?" "My firm already owns a stake in it," Reese said carefully. "I'm here to assess its operations and make recommendations, which is why I need your help." "My help?" "I'm about to be evicted," How can I possibly help you? Reese leaned forward. The management company running this market is incompetent. They're making decisions based purely on short-term revenue without understanding what makes an artisan market actually valuable. I need to understand the vendor experience from the inside. The real experience, not the sanitized version management will feed me. So what? You want me to spy for you? No. Reese held her gaze. I want you to be my girlfriend. Iris choked on her tea. Excuse me? She sputtered, setting down her mug with a clatter. Hear me out, Reese said quickly. There's a week of high-profile events coming up, the Spring Market Showcase, vendor networking sessions, the annual gala. As an obvious outsider, I'll never get honest feedback. Vendors will tell me what they think I want to hear. But if I'm here as your boyfriend, just a supportive partner helping out at your stall, people will talk freely around me. Iris was staring at him like he'd grown a second head. You want me to pretend to be your girlfriend so you can conduct corporate espionage? I want to help you keep your stall, Reese corrected. And yes, in exchange, I need your cooperation. 1 week. You introduce me as your boyfriend. We attend the market events together, and I get to observe the market's dynamics from a vendor's perspective. At the end of the week, I'll personally ensure your lease is renewed with favorable terms. You can do that. Just override the management company's decision? I have significant influence, Reese said, which was the understatement of the century. Iris was quiet for a long moment, her fingers tracing the rim of her mug. Reese watched her think, watched the emotions play across her face: hope, suspicion, desperation, pride. Why me? She asked finally. If you just need a vendor girlfriend for cover, there are 50 other people here you could ask. Because you're the only one who made me feel anything in 15 years. Because watching you describe your candles was like watching someone pour their soul into glass. Because I want to know what coming home smells like on your skin. Because your stall is the one they're targeting, Reese said instead. Which means you have the most to gain from my recommendations. And because I think you're exactly the kind of vendor this market should be prioritizing. Iris bit her lip, and Reese tried very hard not to notice how the gesture made his pulse spike. This is insane, she said. Probably. You're asking me to lie to everyone I know. I'm asking you to play a part for a week to save your business. And what exactly would this performance entail? Reese had prepared for this question. We'd need to be convincing, hand-holding, some light physical affection in public, nothing inappropriate. I'm not asking you to... He cleared his throat. This is purely professional. Professional fake dating. Iris laughed, sharp and slightly hysterical. This is absolutely insane. Yes. If anyone finds out, I'll be humiliated. They won't find out. You're promising me you can save my stall? I'm promising I'll do everything in my power to make sure the market management sees your value, Reese said. Which, given my position, is considerable power. Iris was quiet again, her dark eyes searching his face. Reese forced himself to hold still under her scrutiny, even though every instinct screamed at him that this was a terrible idea, that he was violating every professional boundary he'd ever set for himself. I have conditions, Iris said finally. Relief flooded through him. Name them. First, this is a business arrangement, a performance. We're not actually dating, and we both remember that. Agreed. Second, no lying to my friends. If they ask directly, I'll tell them the truth. That was going to be a problem, but Reese nodded. Fair enough. Third, Iris's cheeks flushed pink, and she looked down at her mug. Nothing intimate. I don't do casual, and I won't pretend to. Hand-holding in public is fine, but nothing more. Nothing that would make this feel real. Something in Reese's chest clenched tight. She was protecting herself, setting boundaries because she'd been hurt before, or because she knew that mixing business and pleasure was dangerous, or because she simply didn't trust him yet. All completely reasonable. So why did her words feel like a challenge? "You have my word," Reese said. "This is a business arrangement. Professional boundaries at all times." Iris nodded, but she didn't look entirely convinced. "Okay, then I guess we have a deal." She extended her hand across the table. Reese took it. Her palm was warm, her grip firm. The touch lasted exactly 3 seconds, professional and brief. It was the most electric handshake of Reese's entire life. The spring market showcase started on Friday evening, and Iris spent the entire day convinced she'd made a catastrophic mistake. She'd agreed to fake date a stranger, a gorgeous, wealthy, impossibly confident stranger who'd somehow convinced her that playing pretend was the solution to her very real problems. What had she been thinking? But when Reese arrived at her stall at 6 o'clock, dressed in dark jeans and a crisp white button-down that made him look like he'd stepped out of a magazine, Iris's doubts temporarily evaporated. He was holding 2 cups of coffee. "Thought you might need fuel," he said, offering her one. "It's going to be a long night." Iris took the cup, her fingers brushing his. "Thank you." "So," Reese looked around her stall, which she'd decorated with fairy lights and fresh flowers for the showcase. "What's the plan, girlfriend?" The word sent a shiver down her spine. "The showcase is basically a wine walk. Attendees buy a ticket, get a glass, and tour the stalls. Most vendors pair their products with wine samples. I've matched each of my candle scents with a complimentary wine. Clever. I'm hoping it'll help people make the connection between scent and memory. Wine does the same thing. One sip and you're transported." Reese's smile was warm and genuine. "You're really good at this." "At what?" "Making people care, making them feel something." He stepped closer, and Iris's breath caught. "Ready to make me look like a supportive boyfriend?" "I don't actually know how to do that," Iris admitted. I haven't done this in a while." Something flickered in Reese's eyes, curiosity maybe, or understanding. "Then we'll figure it out together. Just be yourself. I'll follow your lead." The showcase was more successful than Iris had dared to hope. With Reese at her side, his hand resting casually on the small of her back or his arm draped over her shoulders, everything felt easier. He charmed her customers without overshadowing her, asked intelligent questions that helped her make sales, and somehow made her feel like the most important person in the room. It was an act. She knew it was an act. But God, he was good at it. "Try this pairing," Iris said to a middle-aged couple who'd stopped at her stall. She lit her midnight garden candle, jasmine, night-blooming flowers, and dark earth, and poured them each a glass of crisp white wine. "Close your eyes and smell the candle first, then taste the wine." The couple did as instructed, and their faces lit up with delight. "It's like being in a garden at night," the woman exclaimed. "Exactly," Iris said, beaming. "That's exactly what I was going for." The couple bought 3 candles. After they left, Reese leaned down, his lips close to her ear. "You're brilliant," he murmured. "Watching you work is extraordinary." His breath was warm on her neck. His cologne, something cedar and spice, wrapped around her senses. Iris shivered, and she felt him notice, felt the way his hand at her back tightened just slightly. "Reese," she said softly, a warning. "I know." His voice was rough. "Professional boundaries." But he didn't move away. The final pairing of the night was Iris's Storm and Shelter candle, the same one Reese had bought on his first visit, paired with a bold red wine that had notes of dark cherry and smoke. This one's my favorite, Reese said, picking up the candle. Sea salt and rain. Survival after devastation. And safety, Iris added quietly. Coming in from the cold? Reese looked at her, and the air between them shifted. The stall had emptied out. Most of the showcase attendees had moved on to other vendors. It was just the two of them, standing close in the flickering candlelight. And Iris suddenly became aware of how intimate this felt. How dangerous. Heat slid through her in a slow, traitorous wave. She was suddenly, acutely aware of how little space there was between their bodies. The brush of his sleeve against her bare forearm, the warmth of him at her side, the way his cologne tangled with the sea salt and rain of storm and shelter until she couldn't tell where the candle ended and he began. Her gaze dropped, just for a second, to his mouth, and the thought of what it would feel like against hers stole the air from her lungs. Iris, Reese said, and her name in his voice sounded like a prayer. We should... She cleared her throat. We should pack up. The showcase is almost over. Right. Reese stepped back, and Iris felt the loss of his warmth like a physical ache. Of course. But as they worked together to extinguish the candles and pack away the wine glasses, Iris couldn't shake the feeling that she'd just narrowly avoided something. Something that would have shattered every boundary she'd set. Something that, despite all her rules and all her caution, she was already starting to want. Reese was in trouble. He'd known this arrangement was risky. He'd known that spending time with Iris, touching her, pretending to be her boyfriend, would blur lines he'd promised himself he'd keep crystal clear. But knowing it and experiencing it were two different things. Standing behind her as she worked, watching the graceful efficiency of her hands as she poured wine and lit candles, feeling the soft weight of her body when she leaned back against him. It was intoxicating. And when he'd whispered in her ear, when he'd felt her shiver in response, every professional instinct he possessed had evaporated. He'd wanted to kiss her, not for the performance, not for the act, just because he wanted to know what she tasted like. Thank you for tonight, Iris said as they finished packing. Her cheeks were flushed, her eyes bright with success. I sold more candles tonight than I have in the last month combined. You did that, Reese said. I just stood there and looked supportive. You were more than that. Iris smiled, and it transformed her face. You made me feel I don't know. Confident, like I wasn't doing this alone. Reese's chest tightened. You're not alone, Iris. Not this week. Not ever, if I have anything to say about it. The thought came unbidden, shocking in its intensity. He barely knew this woman. One day. He'd known her for one day. But already the thought of walking away at the end of this week felt impossible. I should get home, Iris said, breaking the moment. Tomorrow's another full day. Let me walk you to your car. Reese, I'm parked 2 blocks away. Then let me walk you 2 blocks. Iris studied him for a moment, then nodded. Okay. They walked in companionable silence, the market's lights twinkling behind them. When they reached her car, a slightly beat-up sedan that made Reese want to buy her something better and safer, Iris turned to face him. This was nice, she said softly. Thank you for keeping your word. About the boundaries. I always keep my word, Reese said, even when it's killing me. See you tomorrow? Tomorrow, Reese confirmed. Iris hesitated, then rose on her toes and pressed a quick kiss to his cheek. Good night, Reese. For one wild heartbeat, he thought she was going to kiss him properly. She hovered there, close enough that her breath brushed his jaw, close enough that if he turned his head a fraction, their mouths would meet. His hands curled into fists at his sides, fingers itching to settle at her waist and tug her in. to find out if she tasted like red wine and sugar the way he'd been imagining all night. She was in her car and pulling away before he could respond. Reese stood in the empty parking lot, his hand touching the spot where her lips had brushed his skin, and acknowledged the truth he'd been avoiding all night. This wasn't an act anymore. At least, not for him. The market was nearly empty when Reese returned Saturday evening. He'd spent the day at Iris's stall again, playing the role of attentive boyfriend while she worked the weekend crowds. They'd fallen into an easy rhythm. He'd hand her supplies, restock her display, charm the customers while she made the sales. To anyone watching, they looked like a couple who'd been together for months, not days. And that was the problem. It was becoming too easy to forget this was an arrangement. "I can't believe how much inventory I moved today," Iris said, counting her cash box as the last few vendors packed up around them. Her hair had escaped its bun hours ago, and there was that familiar smudge of soot on her cheek. Reese had to physically stop himself from reaching out to wipe it away. "If this keeps up, I might actually make rent next month." "You're going to do more than make rent," Reese said. He'd been running calculations in his head all day. With the right support and marketing, Scent and Soul could be a 6-figure business within a year. "Your product is exceptional, Iris. You just need the right platform." She looked up at him, surprised. "You really think so?" "I know so." Iris smiled, then winced as she stretched her back. "God, I'm exhausted. I've been on my feet since 6 this morning." "Then let me help you pack up," Reese said, already reaching for a box of candles. "You shouldn't be doing this alone." "Reese, you don't have to." "I want to." And he did. That was the terrifying part. Reese Sterling had spent 15 years building an empire. He'd negotiated billion-dollar deals, restructured failing companies, and made decisions that affected thousands of employees. He'd never once gotten his hands dirty with the actual work. That's what he paid people for. But here, in this small stall that smelled of beeswax and essential oils, helping Iris wrap candles in tissue paper and box up unsold inventory, he felt something he hadn't experienced in years. Peace. "You're good at this," Iris said, watching him carefully layer candles in a storage box. "Have you done retail before?" "Not even close." Reese secured the box and reached for another. "My background is finance. Venture capital, mergers, and acquisitions. The closest I usually get to a product is reading about it in a quarterly report." "That sounds..." Iris paused, choosing her words carefully. "Distant." "It is." Reese surprised himself with his honesty. "It's all numbers and projections. Abstract. I haven't actually built anything in a long time. I just evaluate what other people build and decide if it's worth investing in." "Do you like it?" No one had asked him that in years. "I used to," Reese said slowly. He set down the box and turned to face her. The market was quiet now, most of the vendors gone. They were alone in a pocket of soft lamplight, surrounded by the ghost of her scents. When I first started, it felt like I was helping people, finding diamonds in the rough, giving talented people the resources they needed to succeed. And now? Now it feels like I'm just moving money around, making the rich richer. I forgot why I started doing this in the first place. The words came out before he could stop them, raw and vulnerable in a way Reese never allowed himself to be. He waited for Iris to look uncomfortable, to change the subject, to remind him this was a business arrangement and he was sharing too much. Instead, she stepped closer. "What made you want to do it?" she asked softly. "In the beginning?" Reese hesitated. He never talked about this. Not with his business partners, not with the women he dated, not with anyone. But in the quiet intimacy of her stall, with her dark eyes full of genuine curiosity, the truth spilled out. My father nearly destroyed our family business, Reese said. He made reckless investments, trusted the wrong people, let his emotions override sound judgment. By the time I took over, we were hemorrhaging money and credibility. I rebuilt it by doing the opposite, making every decision based on cold, hard logic. No emotional attachments, no personal investments, just data and strategy. And it worked. It saved the company. Reese looked at his hands, remembering the endless nights, the brutal choices. But somewhere along the way, I think I forgot that businesses are built by people. That behind every quarterly report is someone like you. Someone pouring their heart and soul into creating something meaningful. Iris was quiet for a moment. Then she reached out and took his hand. The touch was electric, just like their handshake had been. But this time, she didn't let go. "You haven't forgotten," Iris said. "You're here, aren't you? Helping me pack up candles at 10 o'clock on a Saturday night when you could be, I don't know, doing whatever billionaire investors do on weekends." "I'm not a billionaire," Reese said automatically, even though it wasn't technically true anymore. Iris laughed. "Okay, millionaire. The point stands. You saw something worth saving here, in my little candle stall. That means you still remember why you started." Her words settled into his chest, warm and true. "Tell me about your dream," Reese said suddenly. "You mentioned wanting to create a scent that feels like coming home. Have you done it yet?" Iris's face lit up, and she released his hand to move to a small shelf behind her register. She pulled out an unlabeled candle in a simple glass jar. "I've been working on it for 6 months, she said, bringing it back to him. "It's not for sale yet. I keep tweaking the formula, trying to get it exactly right." She lit the candle, and Reese watched the flame catch and grow. The scent bloomed between them, honeysuckle and amber, exactly as she described days ago. But there was more. Vanilla, warm and sweet. Sandalwood, grounding and rich. And something else, something indefinable that made his chest ache with longing. "It smells like..." Reese closed his eyes, letting the fragrance wash over him. Like safety, like being known, like walking through a door and having someone waiting who's genuinely happy you're there. When he opened his eyes, Iris was staring at him with an expression he couldn't read. "Yes," she whispered. "That's exactly it." "Why isn't it for sale?" "Because I don't know if anyone else would understand it," Iris said. "It's so personal, so specific to this feeling I've been chasing. What if I put it out there and people just think it's nice, generic? What if the thing that means everything to me doesn't translate?" Reese understood that fear. He'd spent 15 years protecting himself from it. "It translates," he said. "Iris, this is extraordinary. This is the kind of scent that makes people feel something. That's your gift. You create emotional experiences, not just products." "You really think so?" "I know so." Reese stepped closer, drawn by the candle's light and the hope in her eyes. "You're not making candles. You're making tiny bottles of home for people who've forgotten what that feels like." Iris's breath caught. That's the most beautiful thing anyone's ever said about my work." "It's the truth." They stood there in the candlelight, closer than they'd been all week, and Reese felt the last of his carefully constructed boundaries begin to crumble. He'd come here to assess a property, to make a dispassionate business decision. But Iris wasn't a case study. She was a revelation. And he was falling for her in a way that had nothing to do with fake dating and everything to do with the woman standing in front of him, offering him a glimpse of something he'd convinced himself he didn't need. Home. "I should finish packing," Iris said, but she didn't move. "You should," Reese agreed, but he didn't step back. The moment stretched, charged, and dangerous. His gaze dropped to her lips, and the rest of the world fell away. All the reasons he shouldn't touch her, his role, the arrangement, the promises he'd made, melted under the heat pounding through his veins. He could feel the faint tremor in her breath, see the way her fingers tightened on the edge of the work table like she was bracing herself. If he leaned in an inch, 2 at most, he'd finally know if kissing her felt as inevitable as it did in his imagination. Then Iris's phone buzzed, shattering the spell. She jumped, pulling it from her pocket. "Oh God, it's almost midnight," she said, laughing nervously. "I didn't realize how late it got." "Let me help you finish," Reese said. "We're almost done." They worked in comfortable silence, the tension from earlier settling into something warmer. By the time they'd locked up her stall and walked to the parking lot, Reese had made a decision. He was going to help her. Really help her. Not because of their arrangement, not because he needed her cooperation for his assessment, but because she deserved it. Iris couldn't stop thinking about Saturday night. The way Reese had looked at her in the candlelight, the way he'd talked about his past, vulnerable and honest in a way that made her chest ache. The way he described her dream scent, understanding it in a way no one else ever had. It was getting harder to remember this was fake. On Monday morning, her phone rang with an unfamiliar number. "Ms. Winters? This is Celeste Kim from Maison Luxe." Iris's heart stopped. Maison Luxe was the premier boutique for artisan goods in the city, exclusive, high-end, the kind of place that could make or break a small business. "I'm calling because we received a recommendation about your candle line from a valued contact," Celeste continued. "We're very interested in carrying Scent and Soul in our stores. Would you be available to meet this week to discuss terms?" Iris nearly dropped the phone. Yes, absolutely. When would you like to meet?" "How about Wednesday at 2? "Perfect, I'll be there." Iris ended the call and immediately dialed Reese. "You did this," she said the moment he picked up. No greeting, no preamble. "You called Maison Luxe." There was a pause. "I made an introduction," Reese said carefully. "But I explicitly told Celeste to evaluate your products on their own merit. I didn't buy you the order, Iris. I just opened the door." "Why?" "Because you deserve the chance. Because your work is exceptional and the right people need to see it." Iris felt tears prick her eyes. "Reese, if this works out, if they actually want to carry my line, this could save my business. This could change everything." "I know." His voice was warm, pleased. "You're going to do great. Just be yourself and let your candles speak for themselves." "Will you?" Iris hesitated. "Will you come with me? To the meeting? As your fake boyfriend?" "As my friend," Iris said, and meant it. Another pause. Longer this time. "Yes, I'd be honored." Reese watched Iris present her candle line to Celeste Kim, and he'd never been more proud of someone in his life. She was radiant, confident without being arrogant, passionate without being pushy. She told the story behind each scent, explained her process, and when Celeste asked about production capacity and pricing, Iris answered with the sharp business acumen of someone who'd learned every lesson the hard way. "I'm impressed," Celeste said finally, setting down the coming home candle she'd been examining. "Your products are exactly what we're looking for, unique, high quality, and with clear storytelling. I'd like to start with an initial order of 500 units across your signature line, with the option to expand if sales perform well." 500 units. Reese did the math instantly. At Iris's current pricing, even wholesale, that was enough to cover 6 months of rent and supplies. It was stability. It was breathing room. It was everything she needed. I accept, Iris said, her voice steady despite the tears shining in her eyes. Thank you so much for this opportunity. They finalized the details and signed the preliminary agreement. When they left Maison Luxe an hour later, Iris made it 3 steps down the sidewalk before she let out a sound that was half laugh, half sob. Oh my God, she said, turning to Reese with the most brilliant smile he'd ever seen. Oh my God, Reese. 500 units. Do you know what this means? It means you don't have to worry about losing your stall, Reese said. It means I can grow. Iris grabbed his hands, her excitement palpable. It means I can hire help, invest in better equipment, actually take a day off once in a while. It means my dream is real. Looking at her joy, her hope, her absolute radiance, Reese felt something shift in his chest. He'd spent 15 years using his power to build wealth and influence. He'd made millions of dollars for himself and his investors. He'd been successful by every measurable metric. But nothing had ever felt as good as this moment. Watching Iris achieve her dream, knowing he'd had even a small part in making it happen, was worth more than every deal he'd ever closed. You did this, he said. Your talent, your hard work. I just made an introduction. You believed in me, Iris said. That's not nothing, Reese. That's everything. She was still holding his hands. They were standing on a busy sidewalk in the middle of the afternoon. And Reese suddenly didn't care about the crowds or the arrangement or any of the rules they'd set. He wanted to kiss her. He wanted to pull her close and show her exactly how much she meant to him. How watching her succeed felt like his own victory. How the thought of this fake relationship ending made his chest feel hollow. Iris, we should celebrate, she said quickly, releasing his hands and stepping back. Her cheeks were flushed, and Reese wondered if she'd seen the wanting in his eyes. There's a vendor dinner tomorrow night at the market, part of the spring showcase series. Will you come? As my date? Of course, Reese said. I wouldn't miss it. The vendor dinner was held in the market's event space, a converted warehouse with exposed brick and string lights that cast everything in a warm, romantic glow. Iris wore a dress Reese had never seen before. Deep green silk that brought out the warmth in her skin and made her eyes look almost luminous. She'd left her hair down, and when she'd opened her door to him earlier, Reese had momentarily forgotten how to speak. You look beautiful, he'd managed finally. So do you, she'd said, then blushed. I mean, you look nice, handsome. The suit is nice. Now, watching her laugh with other vendors, her face glowing with success and happiness. Reese couldn't take his eyes off her. Your girlfriend is lovely, said the woman next to him, Sarah, who ran a jewelry stall. How long have you two been together? Not long, Reese said, which was technically true. But it feels like I've known her forever. That was also true, in a way that should have been impossible. You look at her like she hung the moon, Sarah observed. It's nice to see. Iris has been alone for so long, working herself to the bone. She deserves someone who appreciates her. Guilt twisted in Reese's gut. She does. Just don't break her heart, Sarah said lightly, but there was steel underneath. We vendors look out for each other. Before Reese could respond, Iris appeared at his side, slipping her hand into his. Sorry to steal him away, she said to Sarah with a smile. But they're about to do the toasts, and I want Reese with me. They found seats at a table near the front. The market coordinator gave a speech about community and growth, and several vendors stood to share success stories from the showcase week. Then the coordinator said, and we have a special announcement. One of our vendors just secured a major wholesale contract with Maison Luxe, something that benefits not just her business, but raises the profile of our entire market. Iris from Scent and Soul, would you like to say a few words? Iris froze. Oh, I didn't prepare anything. Go, Reese murmured, squeezing her hand. Tell them. She stood on shaky legs and made her way to the microphone. I don't really know what to say, Iris began, and her voice was nervous but clear. Except that this week has been transformative. A few days ago, I thought I was going to lose everything I'd worked for. And now I have an opportunity that's beyond anything I dreamed of. Her eyes found Reese in the crowd. I couldn't have done it alone, she said. Someone believed in me when I'd almost stopped believing in myself. Someone showed me that asking for help isn't weakness, and that the right partnership can make you stronger. The room applauded, and Iris returned to the table, her cheeks flushed. That was beautiful, Reese said. I meant every word. The dinner continued with wine and conversation, and Reese found himself relaxing into the role he'd been playing all week. His hand on Iris's knee under the table, his arm around her shoulders. The easy intimacy of inside jokes and shared glances. It didn't feel like an act anymore. It felt real, dangerously, impossibly real. I need some air, Iris said suddenly, standing. Want to join me? They stepped out onto the market's back patio, a small space overlooking the river. The night was cool and clear, the city lights reflecting on the water. Thank you, Iris said quietly, for everything this week. For the introduction to Maison Luxe, for helping me believe this was possible. She turned to face him. For making me feel like I wasn't doing this alone. You're not alone, Reese said. Iris, He stopped himself just in time. I'm falling for you. This stopped being fake 3 days ago. I don't want this to end. You what? Iris asked, stepping closer. Reese looked at her upturned face, her parted lips, her eyes dark with something that might have been hope or fear or desire, and made a choice. I'm glad I met you, he said instead. That's all. Disappointment flickered across her face, so quick he might have imagined it. Me too, she said softly. They stood there on the patio, the sounds of the party muffled behind them, and Reese fought every instinct screaming at him to close the distance and kiss her. The cool night air did nothing to cut the heat crawling over his skin. Her perfume, soft florals, and a hint of candle smoke wrapped around him, and every slow rise and fall of her chest brushed her shoulder against his arm. His body angled toward hers like she was magnetic, his mouth actually aching with how badly he wanted to tip her chin up and finally taste the yes he thought he saw in her eyes. He'd promised professional boundaries. He'd given his word. And Reese Sterling always kept his word, even when it was destroying him. The Market Gala was the final event of the spring showcase, a black tie affair attended by investors, city officials, and the market's most successful vendors. Iris wore midnight blue silk that made her look like a goddess. Reese wore his most expensive suit and felt underdressed next to her. Last night, Iris said as they entered the glittering venue, our arrangement ends after tonight. Technically, yes. Will you? She hesitated. Will you still help with my lease renewal, even though your assessment must be almost done? I'll make sure your lease is renewed with the most favorable terms possible, Reese promised. You have my word. Thank you. They circulated through the crowd, playing their roles one last time. Reese introduced Iris to contacts who could help her business grow. Iris charmed everyone she met with her genuine passion and talent. It was perfect. It was torture. Because every touch, every smile, every moment of manufactured intimacy reminded Reese that tomorrow he'd have to stop pretending. Tomorrow he'd have to tell her the truth about who he really was. Tomorrow she'd hate him. Reese Sterling. The voice cut through the crowd like a knife. Reese turned, his blood running cold, and saw Brandon Mitchell approaching, a business rival who'd competed against Reese's firm for the market acquisition. No, not now, not here. Brandon, Reese said evenly. I didn't expect to see you here. I still have friends on the market board, Brandon said with an oily smile. He looked at Iris with open curiosity. And you must be. Iris? She said, extending her hand. I'm one of the vendors here. Ah, yes, the candle maker. Brandon's smile widened. It's brilliant what Reese is doing, isn't it? Going undercover to personally assess assets before acquisition. He's always been hands-on, but this fake dating a vendor to get the real story. That's a new level of dedication. The board must be impressed. Reese felt the world tilt. Iris's hand went rigid in his. Acquisition? She repeated, her voice very quiet. Assets? Oh, surely you know. Brandon looked between them, delight dawning in his eyes. Oh my God, you didn't tell her? Reese, you dog. She doesn't know you actually own the market? The noise of the gala faded to a dull roar. Reese saw the exact moment the truth clicked into place for Iris. You own the market, she said, and each word was sharp as broken glass. Not an investor with influence, not a stake, you're the owner. Iris, the assessment. Her voice was shaking now. The fake dating, getting close to a vendor to understand the dynamics from the inside. I was your case study, your business intelligence project. No, that's not. Was any of it real? Iris demanded. Her eyes were bright with unshed tears, but her voice was steel. The help with my lease? The introduction to Maison Lux? Or was that all just, what, compensation? A payoff for my cooperation? Everything I did was because you deserved it, Reese said desperately. Because your work is exceptional. Because I was useful, Iris finished. God, I'm such an idiot. Professional boundaries. You must have been laughing at me this whole time. I would never. You lied to me. Her voice broke. Every single day, you lied to me. Who you were, why you were really here, what this was. And I. She laughed, sharp and bitter. I actually started to believe. She stopped herself, pressing her lips together. Reese felt something crack apart in his chest. Iris, please, let me explain. Don't. She stepped back out of his reach. People were starting to stare. The performance is over, Mr. Sterling. I hope your evaluation was worth it. She turned and walked away, her head held high despite the whispers that followed her. Reese stood frozen in the middle of the elegant crowd, watching her disappear through the exit. Brandon clapped him on the shoulder. Ouch. Well, at least you got good data out of it, right? Reese turned to him, and whatever he saw in Reese's face made Brandon step back quickly. Get away from me, Reese said quietly. Now. Brandon fled. Reese stood alone in the glittering ballroom, surrounded by people celebrating and networking and playing their own games, and felt the hollow victory of his successful assessment crumble around him. He'd come here to evaluate a business. He'd found the most valuable thing he'd ever encountered, and he'd destroyed it with his own hands. Reese didn't sleep that night. He sat in his penthouse overlooking the city, surrounded by the trappings of his success, the expensive furniture, the original artwork, the floor-to-ceiling windows that cost more than most people's homes, and felt nothing but emptiness. He'd built an empire on logic and detachment. He'd convinced himself that personal connections were liabilities, that emotional investments led to ruin. But sitting in his sterile, perfect apartment, breathing air that smelled like nothing, Reese finally understood what Iris had been trying to create with her candles. Home wasn't a place, it was a feeling. and he'd found it in a small stall that smelled like beeswax and essential oils, standing next to a woman who poured her soul into glass jars. He'd found it, and then he'd destroyed it. By dawn, Reese had made his decision. He wasn't going to her apartment. He wasn't going to send flowers or gifts or try to buy his way back into her good graces. He was going to do something he'd never done in 15 years of business. He was going to be vulnerable, publicly, completely, and he was going to give her the truth, even if she never forgave him for the lies. Saturday morning at the Riverside Artisan Market was always busy, but today it felt like half the city had shown up. Iris kept her head down and her smile professional as she helped customers, even though her heart felt like shattered glass in her chest. She'd spent 3 days replaying every moment with Reese, seeing all the lies she'd missed, the careful way he'd phrased things, the way he'd never actually said he was just an investor, the way he'd made her feel special while conducting his corporate espionage. The boutique order from Maison Luxe felt tainted now. Had they really wanted her candles, or had Reese bought their interest? Was anything about this past week real, or had it all been part of his assessment? Iris? She looked up from wrapping a candle to find Sarah from the jewelry stall standing at her booth, her expression concerned. "Have you seen the crowd gathering by the main entrance?" Sarah asked. "Something's happening. I think you should come look." "I'm kinda busy. Iris, trust me, you need to see this." Reluctantly, Iris followed Sarah through the market. As they got closer to the entrance, she could hear a man's voice speaking through a microphone, amplified so the entire market could hear. A voice she knew. "And I want to be absolutely clear about who I am and why I'm here," Reese was saying. Iris's heart stopped. She pushed through the crowd until she could see him. Reese stood on a small platform near the market entrance, still wearing last night's suit, looking like he hadn't slept. A microphone in his hand, the market coordinator beside him looking pale and confused. And the crowd, vendors, customers, market staff, all staring. "My name is Reese Sterling," he said, and his voice carried across the entire space. "I'm the CEO of Sterling Ventures, and my firm owns the majority stake in Riverside Artisan Market." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Iris felt frozen, unable to move or look away. "I came here 2 weeks ago to conduct an assessment of this property," Reese continued. "I was supposed to tour the stalls, evaluate the operations, and make a recommendation to my board about whether to renovate or liquidate." Iris felt sick. What I found instead. Reese's eyes swept the crowd until they landed on her. Even from a distance, she could see the raw emotion in his face. It was something I didn't know how to measure. Passion, artistry, community, and one woman who taught me that the most valuable things in life can't be reduced to numbers on a spreadsheet. He took a breath, and when he spoke again, his voice was rough with emotion. "I made a terrible mistake. I asked that woman, Iris Winters from Scent and Soul, to help me understand this market from a vendor's perspective. I proposed a fake relationship so I could observe without being recognized as the owner. She agreed because I promised to help save her stall from eviction." The crowd was utterly silent now. "But nothing about what I felt was fake," Reese said, and Iris's breath caught. "Somewhere between the first candle she showed me and the last night we spent packing up her stall, I fell in love with her. With her passion, her talent, her fierce dedication to creating something meaningful. With the way she sees beauty in scent and turns it into art. With the way she made me remember why I went into business in the first place. Not to accumulate wealth, but to help people build their dreams." Tears were streaming down Iris's face now, but she couldn't move. "I lied to her about who I was," Reese said. "I let her believe I was just an investor with influence instead of the owner with all the power. And when she found out the truth, she had every right to walk away. He paused, and his voice dropped to something raw and honest. But I'm here today to tell the truth, to everyone, because Iris deserves to know that she was never a case study. She was never a project or an assessment or a business opportunity. Reese looked directly at her, and the distance between them felt both infinite and insignificant. She was the revelation, he said. She was the moment I realized that I'd built an empire but forgotten how to live. That I'd spent 15 years protecting myself from feeling anything. And in 1 week, she undid every defense I'd ever constructed. The market was so quiet, Iris could hear her own heartbeat. I came here to evaluate a business, Reese said. I found the most valuable asset I've ever encountered, and I was the biggest fool on earth to think I could put a price on it. He set down the microphone and stepped off the platform. And then he walked directly toward her. The crowd parted like water. Reese stopped 3 feet away, close enough that Iris could see the exhaustion and regret and desperate hope in his eyes. "I'm sorry," he said, and his voice was just for her now, raw and unguarded. "I'm sorry I lied about who I was. I'm sorry I let you think this was just an arrangement when somewhere around day 2, it became the most real thing in my life. I'm sorry I hurt you." "Reese," Iris's voice broke. "You asked me once why I chose you," Reese continued. "I told you it was because you had the most to gain from my recommendations. That was a lie. I chose you because from the moment you described that storm and shelter candle, I couldn't think about anything else. Because watching you work felt like watching someone paint with light. Because you made me feel something I'd convinced myself I didn't need." He took 1 step closer. "You made me feel home," he said simply. "And I threw it away because I was too much of a coward to tell you the truth." Iris looked at him, at this proud, controlled man who just humiliated himself publicly for her, and felt the ice around her heart begin to crack. "The boutique order," she managed. "Maison Luxe, did you—" "I made an introduction," Reese said firmly. "That's all. I explicitly told Celeste to evaluate your products on their merit and that I wouldn't be involved in the decision. You earned that contract, Iris. Your talent earned it. I just opened a door you deserve to walk through." "How do I know that's true?" "Because I'll give you the email chain, the phone records, every communication I had with Maison Luxe." Reese's voice was steady now, certain. "I'll give you complete transparency. About the boutique deal, about the market's finances, about every decision I've made regarding your stall. No more lies, no more half-truths. Just honesty, even when it makes me look bad." Iris studied his face, searching for any hint of manipulation or performance. All she saw was truth. Raw, painful, desperate truth. "I want to believe you," she whispered. "But Reese, you lied to me. Every day, every conversation, every touch. How do I know this isn't just another performance?" "You don't," Reese said. "I can't prove it with words. I can only prove it with actions, with time, with transparency." He took a shaky breath. "So, I'm asking you to give me a chance to prove it. Not today. Not even this week. But eventually." "What are you saying?" "I'm saying I'll wait," Reese said. "However long it takes. I'll wait while you decide if you can forgive me. I'll wait while you build your business with Maison Luxe. I'll wait until you're ready to trust me again. If you ever are." Iris felt something shift in her chest. This wasn't a grand gesture designed to sweep her off her feet. This wasn't a billionaire throwing money at a problem until it went away. This was a man offering her time, space, the power to decide their future on her terms. This was respect. "I'm not saying yes," Iris said carefully. "Not yet. I need time to think, to process everything. I understand. But She took a breath. But I don't want you to disappear completely. I want transparency. Like you said, I want to see the email chain with Maison Lux. I want to understand what decisions you've made about the market and why. I want to see who you really are, not who you pretended to be. Hope flared in Reese's eyes. Anything, everything, whatever you need. And I want you to fix what's broken here, Iris said, gesturing to the market around them. Not just my stall, all of it. You said you found passion and artistry and community here. Prove it. Make decisions that protect that, not just maximize profit. I will, Reese promised. I already started. I fired the management company last night. I'm bringing in new leadership with actual experience in artisan markets. And I'm restructuring the vendor agreements to be more artist-friendly, lower base rents tied to revenue sharing, so vendors aren't penalized for slow periods while they're building their businesses. Iris blinked. You did all that in one night? I made some calls, Reese said. I'm good at my job, Iris. I just forgot to use my skills for something that mattered. You reminded me. Around them, the crowd was still watching. Iris suddenly became aware of dozens of eyes on them, vendors and customers all witnessing this moment. Everyone's staring, she said. I know. Reese smiled slightly. I just publicly confessed my feelings for you in front of half the city. I'm prepared for staring. Despite everything, despite the hurt and the betrayal and the confusion, Iris felt herself smile. That was quite a speech. I meant every word. I know. And she did. She could see it in his eyes, hear it in his voice. I need time, Reese, to figure out what I want, what I can forgive, what I'm willing to risk. Take all the time you need, Reese said. I'm not going anywhere. He held her gaze for one more moment, and Iris saw everything he wasn't saying, the love, the regret, the desperate hope that she might eventually give him another chance. Then he turned and walked away, leaving her standing in the center of the crowd. Sarah appeared at her elbow immediately. Holy shit, she breathed. That was insane, Iris finished. That was completely insane. Are you okay? Iris watched Reese disappear into the parking lot and felt something painful and hopeful bloom in her chest. I don't know, she admitted, but I think I might be. 3 weeks later, Iris sat in the conference room of Sterling Ventures headquarters, reviewing the new vendor contracts Reese had drafted. They'd met twice since the market incident, once for him to walk her through every communication he'd had with Maison Lux, which confirmed he'd only made an introduction, and once for him to present his plans for the market's future. Both meetings had been professional, respectful, and completely transparent. Both meetings had also made her heart ache with wanting. These are good terms, Iris said, setting down the contracts. Really good. You're giving vendors a lot of flexibility. That's the goal, Reese said. He sat across from her, maintaining careful distance, his expression neutral and professional. I want the market to be a place where artists can take risks and build sustainable businesses without being crushed by overhead. The other vendors are thrilled. Sarah told me you personally met with everyone who was facing eviction and restructured their leases. It was the right thing to do. Iris studied him. He looked tired. There were shadows under his eyes and new lines around his mouth. He was working himself into the ground, she realized, trying to fix everything he'd broken, trying to earn back what he'd lost. How's the Maison Lux order coming? Reese asked, and his voice softened slightly. Are you managing the production? I hired 2 assistants, Iris said. Thanks to the advance payment, I could finally afford help. We're on track to deliver early. That's wonderful. I knew you'd succeed. Reese, I should let you go, he said quickly, standing. I'm sure you're busy. Thank you for reviewing the contracts. Wait. Iris stood too. I have something for you. She pulled a wrapped package from her bag and held it out. Reese took it carefully, his fingers brushing hers. Even that small touch sent electricity through her. What is this? Open it. He unwrapped the package slowly, and his breath caught when he saw what was inside. A candle. The candle. Coming home in a beautiful glass container with a custom label. You finished it, Reese said, and his voice was rough with emotion. I finished it because of you, Iris said quietly. You helped me understand what I was trying to create. You made me believe it was possible. Reese looked up at her, and the careful professional mask he'd been wearing cracked. Iris, I've been thinking a lot these past 3 weeks, she said. About trust and forgiveness and second chances. About what you did and why you did it. About whether I can get past the lie. And Reese's voice was barely above a whisper. I'm not there yet, Iris admitted. I'm still hurt. I'm still angry about the deception. But I also... She took a breath. I also miss you. I miss talking to you. I miss the way you looked at me like I'd created something magical. I miss feeling like I wasn't alone. You're not alone, Reese said immediately. Even if you never forgive me, even if we never... He stopped himself. You're not alone, Iris. I'll make sure the market supports you. I'll make sure you have everything you need to succeed. What if I need more than business support? Iris asked. Reese froze. What are you saying? I'm saying I want to try, Iris said. Not fake dating, not an arrangement, just us. Getting to know each other honestly. No lies, no performances. Just 2 people figuring out if what we felt that week was real. It was real, Reese said fiercely. At least for me. Every moment, every touch, every word. It was all real. Then prove it. Iris stepped closer. Not with grand gestures or expensive gifts, just with time, with honesty, with showing me that the man I fell for, the one who packed up candles at midnight and listened to my dreams and made me feel seen, that he's who you really are. He is, Reese said. Iris, you didn't fall for a performance. You fell for me. The version of myself I'd buried under 15 years of emotional armor. The version that remembered why building things matters. The version that cares more about your success than my profit margin. He set down the candle carefully and took her hands. I love you, he said simply. I fell in love with you somewhere between the first time you described a candle like it was poetry and the night you trusted me with your dream. And if you're willing to give me a chance to prove that love is real, to earn back your trust, I will spend every day showing you that you matter more to me than any deal, any acquisition, any empire. Iris felt tears prick her eyes. I can't promise I'll get there quickly. I can't promise it'll be easy. I don't need easy, Reese said. I just need a chance. Iris looked at their joined hands and then up at his face, at the vulnerability and hope and love shining in his eyes. She thought about the past 3 weeks, how he'd respected her space, how he'd followed through on every promise, how he'd put her needs before his own desires. She thought about the man who'd humiliated himself publicly just to give her the truth. She thought about how empty her stall felt without him there. Okay, she said softly. Let's try. Reese's face transformed with joy, but he didn't move. What are your boundaries? What do you need from me? Honesty, Iris said immediately. Complete transparency. If I ask you something, even if the answer makes you look bad, you tell me the truth. Done. And patience. I might need reassurance sometimes. I might have moments where I doubt you. I need you to understand that rebuilding trust takes time. I understand, Reese said. Anything else? Iris smiled slightly. Actually, date me. Real dates, not market events or business meetings. Just us. Learning each other. I can do that. Reese raised her hands to his lips, pressing a gentle kiss to her knuckles. Thank you for giving me this chance. I won't waste it. I know, Iris said. And she did. Because this time, when she looked at Reese Sterling, she didn't see a billionaire investor or a corporate shark or even a fake boyfriend. She saw a man who'd torn down his own walls for her. A man who'd chosen vulnerability over power. A man who'd found his way home. 6 months later, the Riverside Artisan Market gleamed in the golden afternoon light, transformed by 6 months of careful renovation and artist-friendly policies. New vendors had joined, drawn by the market's reputation for supporting artisans. Old vendors had expanded, their businesses thriving under the revised lease terms. And at the center of it all, Scent and Soul had grown from a single stall to a corner space with custom shelving and a small seating area where customers could experience the candles properly. Iris stood in her expanded stall, watching the Saturday crowd browse her collection, and felt a deep sense of satisfaction. She'd done this. Her talent, her hard work, her vision. But she hadn't done it alone. You're smiling, Reese said, appearing at her side with 2 cups of coffee. He handed her one and pressed a kiss to her temple. Good day? Great day, Iris said, leaning into him. I just finalized the contract for my second location. Maison Luxe wants to give me a permanent space in their flagship store. That's incredible. Reese's face lit up with genuine pride, the expression she'd come to treasure over the past 6 months. You're building an empire. A small empire, Iris corrected, and only because I have a very good business advisor. Over the past months, Reese had helped her navigate the growth of her business, not by making decisions for her, but by teaching her, advising her, supporting her. He'd connected her with manufacturers and retail strategists. He'd helped her build financial projections and develop a sustainable growth plan. But more importantly, he'd kept every promise. He'd been transparent about every aspect of the market's operations, including her in major decisions, even though he didn't have to. He'd been patient when she'd had moments of doubt, never pushing, always reassuring. He'd dated her, really dated her, taking her to dinners and concerts and quiet nights in where they talked for hours. And somewhere along the way, Iris had fallen completely, irrevocably in love with him. Not with the polished billionaire, but with the man who still helped her pack up at the end of long days. The man who remembered the story behind every candle. The man who'd learned to create his own scents just so he could understand her process better. The man who'd shown her that love wasn't about grand gestures. It was about showing up day after day with honesty and respect and unwavering support. I have something for you, Reese said now, pulling a small box from his pocket. Iris's heart skipped. Reese, it's not what you think, he said quickly, but his eyes were dancing. Open it. She opened the box and found a key inside. It's to my penthouse, Reese explained. I'm not asking you to move in, not yet. But I want you to have it. So you always know you have a place with me. A place that's yours whenever you need it. Iris felt tears prick her eyes. That's huge. I know. Reese took her hand. I've been thinking about what you said 6 months ago. About home being a feeling, not a place. And I realized that anywhere you are feels like home to me. My penthouse, this stall, anywhere. Reese, but I also realized I want to give you that feeling too, he continued. I want you to walk through my door and feel safe, feel loved, Feel like you're exactly where you belong. Iris looked down at the key, then up at his face, and felt the last fragile piece of ice around her heart finally melt. I love you, she said. She'd said it before. They'd exchanged the words a month ago, careful and tentative. But this time, it felt different. Complete. Certain. I love you too, Reese said, and pulled her close. The kiss started soft and sweet, and then deepened, all the months of careful restraint melting into something slow and hungry. His hand slid to the small of her back, thumb brushing the warm strip of skin where her shirt had ridden up. And she rose onto her toes, fingers curling in his lapel to pull him impossibly closer. It was the kind of kiss that tasted like everything they'd fought for. Second chances and shared dreams, and the sharp, intoxicating relief of finally being allowed to want. When they broke apart, Iris rested her forehead against his. Thank you, she whispered. For what? For not giving up. For proving that people can change. For showing me that taking a risk on love doesn't mean losing myself. It means finding the best version of myself. You did that, Reese said. I just got lucky enough to be there when you did. Around them, the market hummed with life. Artisans selling their crafts, customers discovering treasures, a community thriving. And in the center of it all, surrounded by the scents she'd created, and the business she'd built, and the love she'd found, Iris finally understood what coming home really meant. It wasn't a place. It wasn't even a person. It was the feeling of being completely known and completely loved, exactly as you are. It was the courage to be vulnerable and the grace to forgive. It was two people choosing each other, day after day, with honesty and respect and unwavering commitment. What are you thinking about? Reese asked softly. Iris smiled and laced her fingers through his. I'm thinking that you came here to assess my worth, she said. And instead, you helped me see my own value. You taught me that asking for help isn't weakness, that the right partnership makes you stronger, not smaller. That home isn't something you find, it's something you build with someone who sees you, all of you, and chooses to stay. Reese's eyes were bright with emotion. And I'm thinking that I spent 15 years evaluating assets and calculating value, never understanding that the most precious things in life can't be measured. That success means nothing if you're not sharing it with someone who matters. That I built an empire, but didn't have a home until I found the woman who taught me that the heart of any great enterprise is the soul you pour into it. He raised her hand to his lips, pressing a kiss to her palm. I came here to assess your business, Reese said softly. I found my life's purpose instead. Iris pulled him close, breathing in his scent, cedar and spice and something uniquely him that she'd come to know as home. We should probably get back to work, she murmured against his chest. Customers are staring. Let them stare, Reese said. I'm not hiding anymore. Not who I am, not how I feel, not how much I love the brilliant, talented, extraordinary woman in my arms. Iris laughed, pulling back to look at him. You're incorrigible. I'm in love, Reese corrected. There's a difference. And as they returned to work, Reese helping customers, Iris crafting her stories, both of them building something beautiful together, Iris felt the truth of his words settle into her bones. This was home, not the stall or the market or even Reese's penthouse. But this, the partnership, the trust, the love they'd built from honesty and forgiveness and the courage to try again. She'd come so close to losing everything. Instead, she'd found something she hadn't even known she was searching for. She'd found herself. And she'd found the person who loved every version of her she discovered. As the afternoon sun slanted through the market's windows, catching the jewel-toned candles and making them glow like captured light, Iris lit her coming home candle and watched the flame catch and hold. The scent bloomed around them, honeysuckle and amber, vanilla and sandalwood, and that indefinable something that meant being loved. Reese wrapped his arms around her from behind, his chin resting on her shoulder. "Perfect," he murmured. "You finally got it perfect." "No," Iris said softly, turning in his arms to face him. "We got it perfect." And in the flickering candlelight of the stall where they'd first met, surrounded by the scents of memory and home and new beginnings, Reese Sterling kissed Iris Winters and silently promised her forever. He'd come to evaluate her worth, but she'd shown him his own value instead. And in the end, they'd both discovered that the most valuable asset of all was the love they'd built together. Honest, hard-won, and utterly priceless. And thank you for spending this time with me. I hope you enjoyed the journey. If you did, please subscribe and leave a comment. I love getting to know you better. And be on the lookout for our next story of strength, perseverance, and love. It should be on your feed very soon.